Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Weirdly Magical podcast. And this is the full moon edition for the full moon in Libra at 0 degrees. And I am Lou. I'm an astrologer, soul astrologer, and writer of a blog on medium.com and also Modern Astrology, Harness the Stars to Discover Your Soul's True Purpose. And you can find me at louiseeddington.com or Google my name, Louise Eddington.
Hi, and I'm Jen. I'm an Akashic reader and healer, a numerologist, teacher, creator of the Illuminating Journey Cards, and offering guidance to inspire your own genius. And you can find me at jendushen.com.
And we both I offer astrology readings, and I also have a Patreon. And Jen, you offer
readings, Akashic, numerology, combination, illuminating cards. I also do workshops, parties, and monthly reports. I mean, support, not reports.
We do a lot, basically. So we don't just do the podcast, in other words. But anyway, before we dive into the energies of this upcoming full moon, I do want to mention a little bit of housekeeping. If you enjoy the podcast, we'd love it if you would subscribe at your favorite podcast provider and or go to iTunes and give us a review, hopefully a 5-star review, because reviews help the podcast to become more visible on iTunes. Plus, we would love to announce that we also now have a Weirdly Magical Podcast Patreon. For just $5 a month, you can support our podcast, and we'll be introducing special patron-only content moving forward. So that's patreon.com/weirdly magical. And lastly, on each episode, we are going to feature a listener question. Questions need to be emailed to weirdlymagicalpodcast@gmail.com, and one question will be chosen at random on each episode. No personal details will be shared on the podcast other than your first name. So email your questions and you might get featured on a podcast episode. So now, diving into the energies, a little overview. First of all, I mentioned that the moon is at 0 degrees of Libra on this full moon, and a full moon is in opposition, which means the sun and the moon are at the opposite points of the astrology chart, and that means the sun is at 0 degrees of Aries. Now, the sun is conjunct Chiron on this lunation. There's also some other interesting energies around the chart that we're going to talk about. There's not any kind of exact major aspects other than the actual conjunction to Chiron, of course. There is a semi-sextile aspect to Uranus that has newly moved into Taurus. But we're going to talk about the energy of 23 degrees and the energy that's just hovering around 23 degrees. Because actually on the full moon, we have Jupiter at 23 degrees Sagittarius, Venus at 23 Aquarius, Vesta at 23 Pisces, Eris at 23 Aries, Mars at 23 Taurus. But we also have a lot of other energies at 24 and 25 that will be moving to that 23 degree mark. So we'll be talking about all of that as well, because that's really significant for this month. So is there anything else we need to mention, or should we just dive in? I think we'll dive in. Jen, why don't you start? I think Jen's pulled a card to start with.
Yes, I've pulled a card, and so the card from the Illuminating Journey deck is number 31, Soul Portal 31. And for those of you who can't see, there's a woman kind of in the cave. I see this as the cave of dragons. So there's a lot of dragons flying around. There's a baobab tree. she's sitting with these pearls and jewels on her lap. And we have these legends, or this idea that dragons collect treasure and go back to the treasure. So I find this really fascinating, that we have this card coming up. Because to me, when I look at this card, I feel like this is a card that recognizes our personal connection to the earth and cosmos, to the magic. So to me, the being in this card, the human, is also claiming her kind of priestess presence, or her magical presence. It's a very divine kind of energy where she sits in the truth of who she is, and she's surrounded by this magic of the jewels, the pearls of her wisdom, the pearls and the wisdom that the dragons bring us as well. So it's an awakening card. I don't know if you see anything I didn't see, Lou.
I don't, but it did kind of remind me that that feels like a very female card to my mind. It also reminds me of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Of the Khaleesi, the Queen of the Dragons, and she was a very powerhouse female character in the Game of Thrones, and she kind of flew on the backs of dragons, and it just reminds me of that, because this is a very female chart. Well, the whole month of March is amazingly female, and so that's what it kind of triggered in my mind.
Yes, absolutely. And those are good points. And I think that the thing to me that is the thing that stands out the most is the stillness of the woman in this space. It's like she knows she belongs here, and this is where her truth comes from. So it's it's the source of her truth is in this space that is one of those invisible spaces, right? It's not something we have in our normal kind of everyday. And so it's this is where we go back to the cave of our truth, the cave of our treasures, the cave of magic. So, and I just love it with that.
Within ourselves, the cave.
Yes, indeed, right? That's when we're coming back, when we rest in who we are, so we can invite the truth of who we are, our intuition and what's around us. So in our stillness, we see what is greater and how we can be part of that. So I think that's a beautiful kind of message of this full moon, because the culmination of us knowing who we are. One of the things that strikes me is this, we are in a 12 universal year. That's 2 + 1 + 9, which gives us 12, and 1 + 2 = 3. So we're in that, 1, 2, 3 rhythm. 1, 2, 3. We're in the rhythm of focusing and connecting, and then creating from that place. So it's very similar. And of course, we have the moon at 0 degrees. So this is the final of 5 full moons at 0 degrees. And the 0 takes us into that pool of reflection in the place of nothingness, where new things are being created. And because this is the final of 5, it's significant. And having a 0 moon is significant. What I was getting, actually, when I was looking at the chart before, I was getting some messages from the Akashic Records. And one of the things they were saying that I thought was very interesting is this idea that with the zeros repeating the 5, which is a number of change, right? And with the 15s that we've had for the new moons, it's really what's happening is we're being given a way to see the world from a new perspective. So instead of like the stories we've had are kind of moving away, so we can be in the present instead of the past. Oh, that happened to me, so it's going to happen again. So kind of like the past is kind of moving out of our kind of direct range. And too much worry about what's going to happen in the future. I've got to do this to get this going. And just bringing us back to that point of stillness, like that woman in the card, right? That point of, this is what I have. and I can just kind of enjoy the idea of what do I want to bring forward.
Mm, mm. So I wanted to quickly just talk about a couple of tarots while we're kind of on the number thing, tarot cards, that is. As Jen said, it's the fifth full moon at 0 degrees. And to reiterate what we've talked about in previous ones, that's the Fool Tarot. Some of you can see it if it's on YouTube, but if not, it's the Fool Tarot. Just look it up. The Fool is full of possibilities. And the 0 always reminds me of possibilities and creation. It's really kind of a kind of like let's look at all, let's look at all the possibilities, the beginnings. So even though a full moon is regularly seen as kind of a fulfillment, it's also a beginning. New moons, it's also the ending and a beginning. Everybody always goes, well, the new moon's a new start, and it is, but it's also the ending of an old. And a full moon has a similar energy. So here we have the new moons, 7 of them at 15 degrees, the very middle degree, the pivot degree, which is a change point to my mind, because when you reach the middle degree of a sign, you're kind of towards the second half of the cycle. So we're always moving in cycles. We start, we end, we begin a new one, we reach a kind of pivot point in the middle, which could be said to be the full moon, where you kind of reach some fulfillment and then let go of some other things, but to make space for the new. So these are very significant in these changing times. So I wanted to bring up the Fool for you again, because it's kind of our last invitation of these series of lunations that's really asking us to step into these limitless possibilities of these changing times. And March is really significant for this in many ways, as you'll kind of hear as we go forward. The other cards I want to mention are the 2 and the 3, because we have all these energies at 23 degrees, and Jen's going to talk a little bit about the number 23 as well. So the 2 card is the Priestess. If you can't see it, if you're just listening, just again go Google the Priestess Tarot. And she's a deeply feminine card, the High Priestess. She's represented by the moon in the Thoth Tarot that I use. So that's one of the female energies in the cosmos. In fact, the moon and Venus were, until relatively recently, the only feminine energies in the chart of the planets, that is. And the second card, the second female card is the Empress, which is the Venus card, the number 3. So again, we have those 2 kind of original female cards, or planets, or luminaries, whichever you want to call them, cosmic bodies, coming in to this lunation, this deeply female lunation. As from my perspective, I look at the whole chart, it's really kind of the divine feminine kind of really stepping into her rightful place in our psyche, in the cosmos, in everything. So I'll expand on that later. I do quickly want to mention, though, before Jen talks about 23 or whatever she was going to talk about next, that the sun is conjunct Chiron on this full moon. Now, or Chiron, however you say it. I think I've been saying Chiron, and I think it's meant to be Chiron, but same energy.
That's probably true.
Now, Chiron is the key to healing, really. He is the shaman, the maverick shaman, the teacher, the philosopher, the healer, the herbalist. He was a very clever centaur, half man, half horse, but with the bottom half as a horse, but with the front legs of a man. he was kind of the connection, the rainbow bridge between our very human nature and spirit, or between the animalistic energy and the higher energy of man. And he's a very interesting character, often known as the wounded healer, which I kind of feel reduces Chiron a little bit to something that he's a lot more of, if you like. So he's at 1 degree of Aries conjunct the Sun on this full moon, and Aries is really the I am, but it's also the very male sign, ruled by Mars, the god of war. Aries was the god of war too. And a lot of astrologers consider that Chiron is moved into Aries for the first time in 51 years to help heal the divine masculine as the divine feminine rises up. There's a lot of kind of resistance to it from the masculine. There's a lot of feeling threatened by women or the divine feminine taking her rightful place. To add to that, the sun is, in our cosmology, is generally seen as more of a masculine aspect. So here we have Chiron and the sun together at 0 and 1 degrees of Aries. Aries, the first sign, so that's a 1 too. Saying, let's heal this. And here we have the moon over there in Libra, which is ruled by Venus, the original woman. So we have those 2 cards again coming together where the moon is in a Venus-ruled sign, saying, come on, let's heal, let's bring this together, because the key for an opposition, which is a full moon, is integration of the opposites. So it's a potentially deeply healing full moon from my perspective.
Yeah, I do agree. It's deeply healing. I think the idea of the 0, coming back to 0, is that space where nothing has been created, is a reminder that it's up to us to create what is true for us. And one of the key things of understanding that we're in a pool of nothing and everything, and the great collective of, as Lou said, infinite possibility, right? So the key here is, yes, we're in this pool of infinite possibility. We're resting at this place, drinking from the water. But at some point we have to focus. And that, of course, is the 1, the dot in the middle of the 0, which then leads into, in the line, becomes the 1. So I think it's highly significant here that we have Chiron at the 1 degree next to the sun, with these masculine energies, but also, for me, I think the idea of having the name, the wounded healer, is to remind us that Chiron, was an outsider, right? He didn't belong to either camp. And this is our story. Like, for each of us, every one of us has a story about being an outsider. And with the moon being in Libra, which is the balance, the scales, it's the memory or the recognition. Like, if we take away all our stories and we come back to the basis of who we are, humans, like we're all the same underneath, that is what this moon talks to me about. Like, remembering we're just past the equinox. Is it the equinox? The spring equinox, the 20th.
On the full moon, yes, we are.
Right. So we've just had that. So there's that, the 0 degree, the Aries, the first sign. So the sign of light, if you think about it, if you're going from the dark or the water into the light, the first spark of all our history is about the spark of light, being able to light a fire. And so what I feel like this moon is saying to us is this opportunity, right? We have our fertile ground. We're going to lay something new here, and we can hark back to the old story, go back to our wounds and all of that, or go, you know what? I'm done being an outsider. I'm the one that decides I belong. And so I'm going to act like I belong. And I'm going to move away all those old stories. Because even as we heal the masculine, divine masculine, you know, the feminine has as much responsibility for that too. And the number one is about responsibility. It is about lighting our own fire and being willing to go, this is what I'm doing. This is my intention. Like, what are we focusing on? What are we healing? What are we moving towards? What are we balancing? There is all of that energy that's flooding into our being, the ability to start over. Some people say there's a naivete around this. I know we've talked about this before. For me, innocence, there's a difference. When you have a clean slate where you're not harking on somebody did this to me, and you come to the table, like you don't have any beef about something. You just know what you want to create. This is like the creation, right? This is that moment where source or whatever it is, like, goes into that zero, into this pool of yumminess, into the pool where everything exists, and goes, right, I'm sparking life. And so what are you sparking life about? What are you bringing into the picture? Which I think is really key. I just want to talk about the dates. The 21st, which is the day of this in London when this happens, universal time. 21st. So 21 makes a 3, 2 plus 1. And 21 is the number of truth. So there we have that saying, the truth will set us free, our truth. So when we're talking about our truth, we're talking about what are we sparking? What flame are we lighting? Where are we putting our energy? What truth do we want to bring to life? Because this is about growth. This is about making choices. So, and especially having Chiron right next to the sun. It's amazing, right? We have this energy of the first house, the first energy, just being lit by this idea of not only being in balance. We've got all these female signs. Of course, Libra is a female ruled by Venus. We have the 2 cards that Lou mentioned, and plus a lot of female energy that is, we've got to think about this, that the male and female energy is all here, all the stars, the universe is all here to help us come to terms with this moment, with this present being.
And then, of course, I've briefly mentioned Uranus in Taurus. It kind of makes me laugh, actually. It's kind of awkward aspects. There's a semi-sextile from the Sun to Uranus in Taurus, but that also means there's a quincunx or inconjunct aspect from the Moon to Uranus in Taurus. So that's kind of a disruptive aspect, both of them. The semi-sextile is quite a spiritual aspect. But I just want to laugh because I saw a post on Facebook by Stephen Forrest. He's the evolutionary astrologer whose kind of work I'm in the lineage of, one of my teachers, as it were. And he posted a meme with pictures of, these new Congress women we have in the United States, looking all serious and like, they're going to kind of kick butt, basically. And then alongside pictures of men like R. Kelly crying, Kavanaugh kind of crying, all these men really angry and crying. And it says, we'd better not put a woman in charge. They're just too emotional. But his comment with it was Uranus in Venus ruled Taurus. So incidentally, the moon's in Libra, Venus ruled. Uranus is in Taurus, Venus ruled. Venus is at 23 Aquarius. We're moving into the age of Aquarius. But he says, watch the old myths hit the brick wall of reality. And I was just like, oh, bam. That's kind of like, So when we talk about healing the masculine and healing our identities, it's within all of us. We tell ourselves stories that we women are all emotional and soft, and nice and things. Well, that's not always true, is it? We have the masculine in us too. So this, we've said it before, we'll say it many times, I'm sure. This is not about men versus women. Though in some cases it is.
Yes, but
Yeah,
it is about the roles that we've assumed, right? We've
exactly.
assumed these roles, we've named these roles, and we've kind of, we're standing with shields behind these shields saying this is the battle. And now we need to go back to the drawing table and go, is this really the battle I want to be fighting? Is this where I want to put my energy, trying to prove to men I'm strong or I'm weak or I'm this or I'm that? I think the downfall of females has been about this idea of getting the attention of men,
Mhm.
uh, and being willing to sacrifice everything to have a man, find you attractive or see you as somebody who's a fighter. And of course, to me, I feel like all of this is just being swept away. And here we have a new slate, and we've got to stop worrying about what other people think about us.
And conversely, the stories men tell themselves, that they have to be the alpha male to impress women.
Right, exactly. Or they need to bring home the bacon or any of that stuff, because that's all nonsense. And the thing what's interesting is when we're looking at Libra, there's that aspect of the other, right? Our relationship to the other. The Aries is us and our relationship and our body and how we see the world, right? How the world sees us. And then conversely is this 0 degree to kind of think about how we see the other. So if we could see the other as, an energy that is willing for us to be who we are and not get so caught up in, how they're labeling us, it does give us a giant sense of freedom.
And of course, it's not only the other as in the other person. Libra, it's the natural world too. It's also our disowned self, the parts of ourselves we don't like. So it's anything that we kind of other.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
This
it's our relationship to all those things. Yeah.
That's right. This is all about our relationship to our thoughts, our beliefs, our responses, what we think other people are doing. And this is, I feel like this is like, a sense of freedom, especially with Uranus now also still at 0 degrees in Taurus. This kind of bringing in some kind of flowering or seeding into the female form, like you have the opportunity now to innovate, bring in new ideas, break through those things. But we don't break through those things by telling people, look at me, I'm breaking through this.
No.
But I mean, this is how we, in our minds, sometimes we think that's what it is. But the innovators are the people that are doing things that don't care about how it looks to the outside. And that's really what's true for all of us. I wanted to address the 23, as you mentioned, so we don't forget about it. That I love the idea that the 23 is present, and so fascinating that we have the 2 female tarot cards, except for the moon, right? That are the 2 and 3 side by side, rest are male forms. And of course, the 2 is about our connection. It's about separation and bringing balance, right? And the 3 is about the creativity, the playfulness, the joy. So it's that idea of what we create together, right? When you put the 2 and 3 together, it's what are you creating? You have a 5. You have that energy of when you look at the 5, it's on a rocker, it's open on both sides. It's all about the momentum of change. And one of the key things here, especially when we're looking at the 23, because 23 is considered the strongest number in numerology, which is, wow, that's kick ass. Like if you're the strongest number, well, hey, no one else can beat you. But what does that mean? Because again, we have a lot of thought around competition or how I look in the world, or what am I going to get for this? And what the 23 does, it actually, the word life adds up to 23. This is about the truth of life is being present in this moment. And when you're present in this moment, you have immense courage. So it's a number of high intuition, in the sense that you know what you need to do to connect and to be playful or be joyful or express who you are, right? You know, there's a part of you that you need to tap into so you can generate it. But there's also that courage it takes to defy convention, which is key to the 23. Like, to have courage, you know, the meaning of courage, to cur the heart in Latin, is to wear your heart on your sleeve. So to be vulnerable and be open, say what you really think, do what you really believe in, and just follow your intuition, follow your guidance, follow what's unfolding in front of you, instead of, oh, I've got to do it so I'll look good. Because ultimately the 5 is about not just change, but being present, because that's the only thing that exists, is the present moment. If you act from the present moment, then you won't be bringing all your baggage into the room.
So I want to talk a little bit about the energies that are around 23 degrees, because I'm actually writing and trying to get an article written about this as well for my blog, but there's so much going on. So on this full moon, I mentioned that we had certain energies at 23 degrees. Kind of the key energy that's triggering all this is the goddess Eris at 23 Aries. She has a 560-year orbit, so she moves very slowly. She moved into Aries back in 1927. So she's in Aries for most of us, basically. We have Eris in Aries. Now, she's the goddess of discord. She's famously known for throwing the apple of discord into the group of gods and goddesses, because she wasn't invited to their party because she was seen as kind of discordant, horrible energy. They didn't want her at the party, so she was never invited to play. And, you know, of course, the apple is a motif that's been run through myths for centuries and centuries. That usually represents the woman, usually has been portrayed as you know, a discordant, bad kind of energy. You know, Eve picked the apple off the tree of knowledge and gave it to Adam, and so there came the fall, all that kind of energy. If you cut an apple sideways vertically, it actually looks like a vulva, the middle of it. So there's got all this energy going on. And I discovered just today that Eris is associated with the number 23, and here she is at 23 degrees, and we've got all this energy converging at this 23 degrees, which Jen has already talked about the number. And shortly after, in fact, just a week after this full moon, we have a perfecting a cardinal grand cross, with Eris opposing Pallas Athena, the owl. She's the goddess of wise justice, and squaring the lunar nodes. But of course, it's not just squaring those. This grand cross is in play now. As we record this on March the 11th, Eris is opposing asteroid Lilith, who is the physical manifestation of Lilith. And a lot of evolutionary astrologers believe that she is the real, whole, total Lilith, the original woman. And they're both squaring the nodes. And of course, Pluto is in Capricorn next to the South Node, and Saturn is coming in to join it. And on March the 29th, the moon will have moved round to be conjunct all those energies, and she will be occulting Saturn and Pluto that day. She will be eclipsing Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. So I could go on and on and on about this, but what I'm trying to say is we have Pallas Athena, goddess, Eris, goddess, Lilith, goddess. As on the full moon, Venus, who's one of the original feminine energies in the chart, is at 23 Aquarius. On the 29th, Black Moon Lilith will be at that same degree, 23 degrees Aquarius. So we've got the 23 showing up over and over and over again. And because it's all helping us to evolve, or giving us opportunities to evolve, all this goddess energy is really pointing to the North Node in Cancer, which will be at 23 degrees on the 29th, and is moon ruled Cancer. So I always kind of feel like that we're just, the goddess is rising, she's taking her equal place. This this full moon is part of this push to heal the balance of masculine and feminine within each of us, to move forward to knowing that we are one big family. And if you think about the symbol for Pisces, for Cancer, the North Node in Cancer, it's the two fish swimming the other way. That got appropriated by Christianity, basically. But really, if you think about it, it's the man and woman kind of spooning each other. Really, it's kind of like on the other side. It's coming together. It's almost like the yin yang symbol. So we're coming together into like this perfect balance of the opposites, or we haven't been given the opportunity to do so, I should say, by this powerful number 23 showing up over and over again. And I do really think that Eris is kind of one of the pivot points. She moved into Aries at the, just after the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, was ratified in the USA. She's kind of a women's Libra, really.
Yes, and it's interesting when you look at the her story, as she was the outsider, right? Mm-hmm. And she chose to, by being the outsider, it gave her a different role. And from the stories, she chose to be discordant, right? People also say she's the sister of Mars, right?
Yeah.
So there is this aspect that I think is, for me, when I listen to you talking, what keeps coming up for me is this idea that how do we become who we are? So a lot of our society has rested on this idea of we've got to follow what other people have done, and this is what it looks like to be a woman, and this is what it looks like to be a man, blah blah blah, etc. But really, what's happening here is, by just these energies of the female taking this place, and these kind of sidelined goddesses or sidelined energies coming forward to speak and convene, they're saying you need to kind of take up the battle for yourself and for what you believe in. Put the energy towards what you want to bring. And when I think about Eris, for me, this is this energy of her kind of throwing in the apple was really to make people think, right? She didn't just, that was about making people think. She was a changing situations, the same as the Trojan horse. That was taking an idea of all these people who thought no one can get in, we're safe, right? But then you do something like you offer a gift that people have never seen, and suddenly they embrace it. So how can we bring in that idea without being destructive? That's a key that really is the essence of the 23, this number, which brings life because we're being creative and we're being open.
Well, the funny thing was, in the myth of Eris, she threw the apple in, and on it was written, who is the fairest? And even the interpretation of the myth throughout the centuries has been interesting, because it was taken to mean who's the most beautiful. Now, if you think really of the word fairest, and Eris is opposing Libra at the moment, it's who is the most fair, balanced, just, because Eris is quite a benevolent figure, really. She's known as discordant, but she's kind of just, she causes discord where people are kind of full of artifice and fakery, and that she just shakes the apple cart, basically. She's not She's not discordant in a destructive way.
Well, I guess it depends who you speak to, but the bottom line, her role, and that's the role of any discord, is to make people think. So people stop and go, right? And you get to interpret, which is really what's happening now. We get to interpret how we're going to use this energy. Are we going to use it to go, okay, what would shift this world we're living in to make things fairer for everyone? Or, oh, I want to look the best, right? So I'm going to do whatever I can to look the best. Like, this is free will in action, right? It's the idea. And to me, that's the 23 too, is this idea of us being given opportunities, but we have to decide what it means. And we have to decide, what are we battling about? Like, the people decided it meant who's the most beautiful, and they were battling over to be the most beautiful. Like, we have to remember that it's us that decides what our battle's about, and if it's worth this energy.
I should clarify. When I say she's not a discordant energy, I actually mean astrologically. Because, because you know, it's been shown that generally when she triggers things, it's not a violent kind of bad feeling energy. It usually.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably true. Like, I know every one of these planets or stars or whatever they are have names that have a history, right? And that history has a history of the interpretation. It's been interpreted that this is what this means. And I don't say that the history of these people doesn't have, or these beings doesn't have some energy. However, we get to focus on what we focus on. You know, we can know people and say focus on the nasty things about them, or we can focus on what are they doing that's actually helping the world and us, because everyone's doing stuff, right? So it's how we name it that I think is key here. I wanted to talk about Ceres, because I think that's a really important aspect here. She's the biggest dwarf planet. And she's close to our orbit, right? Closer than a lot of the others. She's equal to Pluto. And remember, she was married to, and it was her brother, Jupiter. 13 degrees. Now, one of the key things about Ceres is that she is the mother of grain. She's the mother of fertility, right? So she creates famine and feast. And that's very powerful, I think, because at 13 degrees, that's the feminine number. That's the divine feminine number.
She's Sagittarius, by the way.
Yes.
At the moment. Yeah.
This is I think this is a key. It's almost like she's the mother of all of these females coming back. Like, she's the one that's reminding us of what does it mean to be fertile, and what are we kind of watering with this fertility? What are we growing? You know, what crops are we growing? And she's kind of, it's like there's a meeting of all of these women, right? Well, I say woman, but beings, right?
All these parts of these.
Yes, Vesta, and you know, it's so fascinating. She's at 13, which is such a powerful number, and then many of these other females are 23. So it's like, yes, I'm gathering the forces. What are we you know, what are we fertilizing? What are we bringing to life? What are we deciding about this? And kind of opening us up to this idea of being mothered by this this phenomena of this moon, right? We're being mothered into this idea that we can do things and we can do them differently. But I think the key here is, when you look at the 2 and the 3, and you look at all of these planets, is recognizing the power of the female is not just in the sweetness or the kindness or the fact that they can bear children, but that they are warriors too. Like, we have it in us, and so we must embrace it in a way that creates what we desire.
Definitely. I just remembered something as well as you were talking, and something that doesn't show up on my software. So it's not in the chart that Jen and I are looking at. But another dwarf planet, Haumea,
Yes. Yeah.
is, I think she's also at 23 degrees Libra right
Isn't that interesting?
And she's the goddess of birth, basically, or fertility. So she's birthing the new. So, and there's another one for you. I just wanted to bring her in.
No, that's good, right?
Yeah.
And we should actually count how many females there are at the 23.
On the full moon chart, there is 1, 2, 3. Oh, Mars is as well, though. So it's almost like the women are taking it to the male.
Well, you know, and remember, I think I said last time that it feels like Mars is supporting, or one of them. Mars, and you know, the male energy, look, Jupiter's at 23 too. They also are supporting. If we think about healing the masculine, why wouldn't the masculine want to
absolutely
support, right? This
Yeah.
change, this idea of freedom, of the breath of life.
And Mars is in an earth sign, and I think it was Saturn was supporting last time as well. Mars and Saturn were supporting kind of the new moon. But of course, you know, here we have Mars at 23 in an earth sign, Venus ruled sign, which is a feminine sign. We have Pluto and Saturn over there in Capricorn, and all earth signs are feminine. So there we go. They're there. So yeah, I believe you're right. They are supporting.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. If we think about the balanced or harmonized male and female energy, the yin and yang, then why wouldn't we all work together? I mean, this is the bottom line, right? We want to bring in the different discordant pieces of ourselves and the discord that we have amongst each other, and find that energy, which I think we have an opportunity. Like if we take this opportunity to find ways to diffuse discord, we will, you know, it'll save us a lot of suffering. If we choose not to, and we're just going to go hell for leather, I want my revenge, I want to prove, you know, I'm going to make my presence felt in this way and punish others, or whatever we call it, it will take, you know, we're going to have a different experience, and a, you know, a violent experience.
Or you can cause the clever discord that's not. I always think of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when I think of Eris. You know, she's saying, and of course she's not the only one. There's Omar as well, Ilhan Omar, and there's a couple of them, but they're doing it by speaking the truth, and by so a lot of people don't like them because they're speaking the truth and causing discord. But it's kind of necessary discord, and they're doing it with big smiles on their faces.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, because this is what we were saying about the intelligence of Eris, right, and some of the others' energies, is you don't have to beat somebody up to change the world, right? And in fact, that just doesn't do anything. But if you bring intelligence and smarts and patience and humor into the situation, and curiosity, that's a key. It's a key energy of the year, and a key energy to go, I'm curious about, you know, and asking those kind of hard-hitting questions in a very kind of practical way, and not being sidelined, right? So that's the difference, is when you know, like, they know what they're there to do. They know they have the education and the intelligence and the backing of people to ask these questions. So we all have to kind of put ourselves in their shoes in a way about our own lives, and go, oh, I know what I need to, and if I don't, I can ask somebody, go do some research, give me the right questions. Where do I want to be hard hitting so I can be impactful, instead of wasting my energy just blaming somebody else, right? I think that's a key thing when you talk about Alexandria Cortez and the other woman, right? Is what they're doing is they're using their resources wisely, and they're not getting distracted.
Yes. which could be said what Eris was doing in the first place.
Right, exactly. I mean,
But it was just
right. She found, if you think about just listening to those stories, whatever you think around them, but the idea of rolling, everyone was fighting in that story about whatever, and just rolling in the apple and saying, well, who's the fairest of us all, just changed the whole conversation. Right? And got people doing different. Yes.
Talking of curiosity, though, I did want to mention that but the full moon is on the equinox, as Jen said, March, just after the equinox, and Mercury is stationing direct a week afterwards. So we've got this whole period around the full moon and this grand cross that we've talked about, the cardinal grand cross with the goddesses all taking their thing. And here's Mercury, the curious, the messenger, stationing conjunct Neptune, where incidentally the last new moon was, at 16 degrees of Pisces, in the most in the sign of the collective, the muse, the mystery, the connection with spirit. So, kind of all this is saying the curiosity is not about asking other people. It's taking us into this spiritual space, or inner space, meditative space, really, or however you see God, really. I don't see it as out there. I see it as within us. It's saying ask these questions. And also, incidentally, Mercury is represented by the Magician Tarot card, which is the number 1. So here we have 0, 1, 2, 3.
Right. And that's a fascinating point. As you were talking, I remember I forgot to mention the one key thing about Ceres that I think is important, as well as the moon, is they represent the people. They don't represent the people on top. They are speaking for the people. Mm-hmm. So we have all the support, right? And with Mercury, well, right now for this full moon is 18 degrees. Now this is a 18 universal day for this full moon. So that's very interesting, because 18 is a number of, it's a 9. It's about releasing to me, the egoic aspect that is in charge. Like when we are ruled by our ego, then we make like false choices. Like we don't take responsibility for our choices and our beliefs. We kind of get confused. And so remembering to let go, and that's how we recognize we're all part of the same group, is by getting curious. Not being dominant. What's the word? Like, what's the opposite of curious? It's like when you're rigid and you're like, this is what it is, right? There is
dogmatic. There we go. Dogmatic.
Yes, dogmatic. Exactly. So this is the difference, is when you're in with Mercury being that close to Neptune, it's an opportunity to see where we've been dogmatic, see where we've fooled ourselves, and let all that stuff come rising to the surface, so we can, instead of denying it and saying, oh, that's not true, they would never do this, going, this is the way it is, and how do we change it? What do we want different?
I love always fascinates me. This is what keeps me with astrology forever and ever, because there's obviously some kind of design here, because everything always leads into the other one, and it's giving us all these opportunities to grow and evolve. It's whether we take those opportunities is another matter, but Jen and I kind of aim to help you see what the universe is telling us. So
yes, exactly. Recognizing your right to be an individual in the collective, really understanding what that means for you, going inward to that idea of whatever source is for you. And just like the picture we started off with, the woman in that cave, is kind of like that. Coming back and sitting with that idea, what is important to me? What do I believe? Where do I want to put my energy and focus, so I can express myself? What I want to express my truth.
Now, I'm wondering if we should move on. Oh, shall we do the question first of all?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Question.
So we had a question from Melanie. And Melanie asked, do you find there are often similarities between a person's sign or more dominant planets and their soul or main numerology number? I'd say yes.
Definitely. Like we have to, yeah.
I'm not a numerologist, though. I just know my numbers.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we can look at what we know.
Yeah.
The truth is that all divinations overlap. So there is always a connection. And it might not be obvious. That's kind of the thing. It's not always obvious. But definitely it's true. Like for you, Louise, right? One of your main numbers is a 5, right?
Mm.
And that's definitely part of who you are, the need for freedom and for
and because I have 5, well, I have to tell people I have Sagittarius. Jupiter is associated with 5, I believe, right? And Jupiter's my ruling planet anyway. I have Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Pallas Athena, Sun, Ascendant, Juno, I think, a couple of others, all in Sagittarius. Jupiter is my ruling planet because it rules my ascendant, and I am a 5 life path number. So I am like a 5 in every way. So
yeah, and it shows up in your chart as well as your numerology.
yes,
And, yeah, right, exactly. So there's always a link. It's just like sometimes it's not as obvious, but there is. And of course, the numbers on your chart also influence. I think sometimes we can get very confused because there's some rigid structures about what it means. And so we might feel like that doesn't relate to me. Like my destiny number is a 31, which is 4. 13. No, sorry, it's 13, which is 4. And I don't resonate with the typical 4, but then it's my destiny. So remembering that the number of the destiny is also about what we're here. That's a potential to create. It doesn't mean it's true, right? So we've also got to understand what they mean. And, I'm a Taurus, and there's a lot of me that is about this idea of structure. I love people. I'm very practical. Like I'm one of those practical mystics. I like, what is all this about? But then what are we going to do with it? It's not just out there, right? Which is very much about the 4. I'm connected to the earth. The 4 is about the earth. It's about creating structure, having a plan.
And I will say as well, to answer Melanie, that yes, I think we've answered the numbers and the astrology. But I will say that any other divination, I have a friend who does hand analysis that ties in as well. The universe is all connected. All these things, as we've proved, the tarot as well. The cards always tie in with what's happening in the astrology as well. It's
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Every divination is a different part because we may not resonate with all divination tools, divinatory tools. We may not have access to it. But if you look across the board, if you map it out, there is incredible similarities. And even more powerful, I've found when I've done numerology for people, like especially when I'm looking at their chart, it's incredible to see how the numbers can reveal, and deepen the relationship to yourself, because we're complex beings. Like it's not like we're just like one little box. There's many pieces that fit in.
And it's a complex universe, and if you really want to go down lots of rabbit holes, it's all about numbers and math. Really, astrology is math. How the cycles move is math, and our body's math. It's all to do with like the Fibonacci sequence and all those things like that. They all relate. They all tie in at the bottom of it.
Exactly. I say, and I believe that numerology or numbers is the first original way for the universe to communicate with us, because we all have numbers in everything, right? Even if you do nothing else, numbers will come in your life. And so it's key. right?
Yeah,
But
it
then it
is.
links. And it's fascinating to see, like, when I'm talking about stuff and you say it's the same message, even though we're talking up from two different.
But they're the same thing, really.
Yeah.
Because I look at, the astrology, and everything's at a certain degree. It's all to do with numbers again. So, yeah. So it's all. Anyway, I think hopefully we answered your question. And, on that note, I want to repeat that we'd love to answer a question an episode. So weirdlymagicalpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your questions and we'll pick one at random on each episode. So probably time for the symbols, I think.
I think so. And thanks for your question, Melanie.
Yes, thank you. I know Melanie always has a lot of questions. She has Gemini moon like I do. Endlessly curious.
Wonderful to be curious. Am I going first?
Yes, you can go first.
So the Sabian symbol, so Libra 1 degree, a butterfly made perfect by a dart through it. This is a symbol of completely unconditioned potentiality, as this may be grasped on the imaginative side of life. Here are elements of individual consciousness emerging from a primordial time formlessness, and of wisdom developing through the human spirit's continual determination to project itself into experience. Each person comes into identifiable being through the nature which has been molded for her, and thereupon refines this for her own self-expression. The key word is articulation. When positive, the degree is woman's awakening to the need for some more whole-souled focus of character, and when negative, the loss of all true selfhood by a needless surrender to the world and conformity to its ways.
And there's that word again, possibilities.
Right.
And it shows up in the Chandra symbol as well. So I'll read that. So the symbol itself is a group of fat Italian ladies preparing bread. Archetypal, universal, and diffuse allegiances, activities, and realms of experience, becoming camouflaged perfectly by adopting a persona that is wondrously engaging and easily connected with, putting it on a bit heavy, thick grease paint. So this is kind of, to my mind, talking about that revealing, what's behind. Anyway, you exult in getting away with seeming to be the world's most anonymous person. The disguise can stick to the face. Overt consciousness awash in mass identification. At times, you are able to penetrate through and find open possibilities, but you are primarily engrossed in the outer and alive to the advertised sensations of what it is like to be popular, well received, and simply welcome wherever you go as part of the mix, and no problem at all. I actually take that as a warning to not be engrossed in the outer and trying to impress the other all the time, because you don't put on the thick grease paint and camouflage yourself personally.
Yeah, right. That was interesting. They were both similar in what we talked about, this idea of, articulating what is true for you and not getting caught up in the fake or the symbols of what we think. Just like in luxury or something, the symbol is to have a big house or a big car or something like that.
Yeah.
And the symbols don't actually fulfill you. And they won't get you where you need to go, right?
Exactly. And exactly why Eris threw the apple. Because they were all like trying to impress each other, the other gods and goddesses. And yeah, but anyway. Okay, Jen, do you want to remind everybody where they can find you?
Sure. You can find me, my website is jenduchenne.com. My group on Facebook, the free one, is the Light Club of the woo-woo weirdos of the world. And of course, you can Google me. I'm pretty much all over the place.
And you can find me. My website is louiseeddington.com. Again, my books, Modern Astrology. My free Facebook group is Planetary Magic Cafe. Jen and I both offer for a variety of ways to work with us if you want to check out our websites. And a reminder that we now have a Patreon, patreon.com/weirdly magical, and just $5 a month you'll get kind of first dibs on the podcasts, and once we only get to 10 patrons, we'll start creating some patron only content
Comments and content.
Oh, I like to remind everybody all the time that Neptune is still squaring all my stuff. Will be for ages. So I have it's like, and this full moon is on my moon's nodes and everything's hitting my charts. So it's wonderfully, weirdly magical, I have to say, but sometimes confusing.
We all need confusion to help us think differently. Right?
Break
the old. It's like the apple.
I'm embracing the confusion, but it sometimes makes me spit my words. And
I get it. You know, in many ways, words are irrelevant, but
exactly.
how we communicate.
Exactly. So it's goodbye from Lou.
And goodbye from Jen.